The first sip of coffee never came. By the time Rachel Morgan stood in Lucas Varelli's corner office, the 2 steaming mugs on his polished mahogany desk had already gone cold. That detail would lodge itself in her mind later, the deliberate choreography of power. Coffee poured not to be shared, but to sit untouched, part of the staging for a conversation that had already been decided. The marble floor caught every click of his Italian shoes as he paced, a rhythm that belonged less to a CEO and more to an executioner. She had walked in expecting to finalize Monarch's quarterly strategy, a framework she had nurtured from a fragile idea into one of the most advanced AI systems in the world. 10 years of work, 2 million lines of code, dozens of patents, sleepless nights turned into clean architecture. Monarch was as much her autobiography as her career. But what she found was not strategy. It was succession. "Rachel," Lucas began, his tone carefully arranged, I need you to take on a special project. My niece Madison just joined us. She's brilliant, graduated summa cum laude in digital storytelling. The board thinks she'll be perfect to lead our innovation division. I'd like you to train her, show her the ropes, maybe start with loops, functions, that sort of thing. The words hung in the room like cigarette smoke, suffocating, impossible to wave away. She kept her voice level, steady, the tone that had carried her through hostile boardrooms. "Lucas, I appreciate your confidence, but I'm currently managing 17 projects. The Durham presentation alone, this is the priority," he cut in. "Madison is family. She's the future." It was then she understood. Loyalty had been replaced by nepotism, and merit was now expendable. Rachel had seen the warning signs, the Instagram announcement, the congratulatory emails. She had tried to dismiss them as corporate gossip. But now it was official. Her decade of devotion was being reduced to a training module for an influencer with better lighting than credentials. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Rachel said. "Monarch is too complex, too valuable. It deserves more than a crash course." His expression shifted, a flicker of temper beneath his boardroom polish. "Are you refusing a direct request from your CEO? I'm prioritizing the company's interests." The silence stretched long enough for her to notice the condensation sliding down the untouched coffee cups. Finally, Lucas pressed a button on his desk phone. "Send HR up immediately." The verdict fell like a gavel. "Rachel Morgan, your lack of cooperation and failure to align with company culture has made your position untenable. You're terminated, effective immediately. You have 15 minutes to collect your belongings." She should have felt broken. Instead, she felt a grim inevitability. She had prepared for this moment from the day Madison's hiring was announced. Every entrepreneur who builds within an empire knows that one day the empire might turn on them. What mattered was whether you were ready when the turn came. Lucas added one final flourish. "The NDA you signed is still in effect. I trust you remember the penalties for violating it." Her hand on the chrome handle, Rachel allowed herself a small smile, not of joy, but of memory. "Of course, Lucas," she said. "I remember everything." She walked out, her reflection caught in the glass walls, hair pulled back the same way as her first day, navy blazer buttoned like armor. She looked the same, but she was no longer an employee. She was an exile. The hallway ahead stretched like a funeral procession route, lined with muted faces who didn't dare look up. Somewhere a server hummed. Somewhere else a coffee machine sputtered. The world inside Archite continued, unaware that in less than 2 hours its crown jewel would begin to slip from its grasp. History often pivots not on wars or elections, but on smaller scenes. A refusal, a termination, a cold cup of coffee at 7:59 a.m. This was one of them. The words were still echoing when the security team appeared. Marcus and Derek, men Rachel had shared coffee with countless mornings, fell into step beside her. Neither could meet her eyes. That silence spoke louder than any apology. In companies like Archite, friendship ended where hierarchy began. The march down the corridor was strangely ceremonial. Through the glass walls of the engineering floor, she saw her team hunched over their monitors, faces bathed in the light of code. Not one of them looked up. In a building where gossip traveled faster than fiber optic lines, everyone already knew. The condemned are always watched, but never acknowledged. Her office, soon to be labeled former, looked exactly as she had left it 45 minutes ago. Coffee cooling in a novelty mug, family photographs lined across the desk, a stress ball shaped like a server. She began the ritual every terminated employee learns by heart, packing with hands that move automatically, removing nothing that could be construed as property, keeping movements deliberate, contained. She folded memories into tissue paper as though preserving relics from an archaeological site about to be destroyed. At the bottom of the drawer, her fingers found what they had been searching for, a small black USB drive, no bigger than her thumb. To the untrained eye, it was indistinguishable from the thousands of drives used for family photos or tax returns. To Rachel, it was a key. She palmed it smoothly, slipping it into her jacket pocket with the same ease one might pocket loose change. "That's company property," came a shrill voice from the doorway. Madison Varelli, fresh designer dress, phone raised, recording, stood like an amateur prosecutor in a courtroom she didn't understand. "I'm documenting this for Uncle Lucas," she announced. "We can't have her stealing anything." Rachel turned slowly, expression calm, fury carefully hidden behind civility. Up close, Madison looked younger than her 24 years, all highlights and extensions, and the untested confidence of someone whose safety net was woven from family ties. "Hello, Madison," Rachel said evenly. "Congratulations on your new position." The greeting disarmed her, but only for a moment. "Uncle Lucas says I'll be taking over your projects. Monarch isn't that complicated once you know the basics." Behind Madison, Marcus rolled his eyes, a tiny act of rebellion that Rachel caught, but Madison did not. "You should do wonderfully," Rachel replied, resuming her packing. 3 items left: the ergonomic mousepad, the framed Hello World output, the first sign Monarch had ever lived, and the mug that still bore half-cold coffee. "You should probably leave your passwords," Madison continued, heels clicking into the office. "Uncle says people like you always try to sabotage things when they leave." "You people." The phrase hung in the air like the scent of something spoiled. Rachel kept her voice neutral. "All my credentials were revoked at 7:59. You'll need to create new access protocols." Madison frowned, clearly not understanding. "Whatever. Just don't take anything important. I'm watching." The box was closed. Rachel stood, surveying the space one last time. The late nights, the breakthroughs, the failures, the ambition crystallized into architecture. Then she gestured to the empty desk. "It's all yours. Good luck with level 17. Madison blinked. "What's level 17? "Nothing you need to worry about," Rachel said, brushing past her. The words were casual, but in them lay the kind of foreshadowing only history would reveal. The elevator ride downward felt less like transportation and more like descent. Each passing floor, another stratum of her old life falling away. Marketing, legal, HR. By the time she reached the lobby, she was no longer part of Archite at all, just a visitor holding a cardboard box. The receptionist glanced up with a sympathetic look, one of the few human gestures Rachel had received since the verdict. Then the revolving doors pushed her out into the city. Outside, the rhythm of the metropolis continued unbroken, commuters clutching coffee cups, traffic lights cycling with bureaucratic indifference, the steady pulse of a world too large to notice one woman's exile. Yet Rachel knew better. Within this box of mementos and the small weight in her jacket pocket, the balance of Archite's future was already shifting. History is often narrated as a sequence of great events, wars, treaties, inventions. But more often, it is a chain of smaller vanishings, the quiet moment when a loyal builder is escorted out, when her nameplate is removed, when her elevator ride becomes a descent into independence. 15 minutes to erase a decade. 15 minutes to vanish. The city swallowed her as she left Arkite's glass fortress, but exile did not mean helplessness. In the dim fluorescence of the parking garage, Rachel slid into her car. The cardboard box sat in the passenger seat, a museum exhibit of a life dismantled. But it was the smaller object in her jacket pocket, the thumb-sized USB, that mattered. She pulled out her laptop, balancing it on the steering wheel. The cavernous garage suddenly transformed into a command center. The Monarch interface came alive on the screen, clean, minimalist, her design philosophy etched into every pixel. Most executives, most engineers even, thought Monarch was only the AI they could see. Chatbots, predictive analytics, natural language processing that dazzled investors. What they didn't see was the skeleton beneath, 17 layers of interlocking logic, each dependent on the one beneath it. Rachel's fingers typed credentials, not the Arkite-issued ones, those had died with her employment at 7:59, but deeper keys, credentials bound to her original authorship. The screen flickered. Then it spoke in plain white text. Welcome, architect. System status, operational. Layers 1 of 16 active. Layer 17, standby mode. Layer 17, her contingency, her dead man's switch. While Lucas celebrated each new feature she unveiled over the years, Rachel had quietly built something else into Monarch's foundation. Not sabotage, not malware, but a legal safeguard disguised as code. A licensing gate. If the system's registered architect was ever terminated without a formal transition, Monarch would demand verification within 90 minutes. Without it, the system would not shut down. It would simply refuse to recognize itself. A masterpiece of logic. You could not hack what no longer acknowledged its own existence. She initiated the sequence. Employment status change detected. Initiating license verification protocol. A countdown appeared. 89, 59, 89, 58, 89, 57. Every tick was both a heartbeat and a drum roll. Her phone buzzed. A text from Janet, her lead developer. Heard what happened. Team is ready to walk. Rachel typed back quickly. Don't, not yet. Watch the 9:30 demo. A pause, then Janet's reply. What did you do? Rachel allowed herself the smallest smile. Nothing. Just letting nature take its course. She leaned back, the laptop's glow painting her face in pale light, the numbers marching downward on the screen. 88, 45, 88, 44. She thought of Lucas's smugness, of Madison recording with her phone, of 10 years reduced to a training session. She thought of the coffee mugs, one meant for her, never offered. The weight of betrayal was heavy, but beneath it pulsed something sharper, resolve. The garage felt hushed, like the antechamber of history. Somewhere above, Arkite's executives were making final preparations to dazzle Durham equity with Monarch. Somewhere, Madison was probably live-streaming her new desk. None of them knew that the foundations beneath their empire had just shifted. Her phone buzzed again. This time, her mother's name lit the screen. Rachel answered. Sweetheart, why are you calling so early? Is everything all right? The voice was tired from treatments, yet still steady. The voice that had carried her through storms. Everything's fine, Mom. Better than fine. Remember that paperwork you signed 3 years ago for the LLC? Her mother hesitated, then laughed softly. The one you said was just a formality? Of course. It's about to become important. You might get calls today. Don't answer them. Let everything go to voicemail. There was silence, then her mother's intuition. Rachel, what did they do to you? They fired me, Rachel said simply. But they forgot to read the fine print. A pause, then fierceness. Good. I never liked that, Lucas. Too much gel in his hair. No one with that much gel can be trusted. Rachel laughed, tension breaking for a heartbeat. Love you, Mom. Love you too, sweetheart. Give them hell. The call ended. Rachel glanced back at the screen. 86-12. 86-11. The numbers fell steadily, indifferent and absolute, like sand through an hourglass. History does not always announce itself with gunfire or proclamations. Sometimes it begins in a parking garage, with a laptop balanced on a steering wheel and a countdown running silently toward inevitability. Layer 17 had awakened. The clock was ticking. The 42nd floor conference room had been polished into a shrine to confidence. 3 wall-sized screens gleamed at the front, displaying Monarch's sleek interface like a crown jewel under museum lights. Rows of engineers stood stationed like ceremonial guards, ready to step in at a moment's notice. And around the vast oak table sat Durham Equity's delegation, 5 investors in immaculate suits, pens poised over tablets, their faces unreadable in the way only seasoned financiers can manage. Lucas Varelli stood at the head of the room, posture sculpted for persuasion. He radiated the overconfidence of a man who believed the performance was already won. Beside him, Madison had changed outfits, another designer piece, another chance to live-stream the moment. Her phone camera was angled just so, broadcasting Arkite's supposed triumph to thousands of followers. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucas began, his voice practiced from countless pitches, what you are about to witness is not just software. Monarch represents the future of artificial intelligence, 10 years of innovation, a decade of vision, and under our new Director of Innovation, he gestured toward Madison, who waved into her phone, we are ready to scale beyond anything competitors can imagine. Across the table, Richard Durham himself leaned forward. His silver cufflinks caught the light. Show us, he said simply. The lead engineer nodded, fingers poised over the keyboard. The screens flickered, Monarch's initialization sequence rolling smoothly. Elegant graphics, status bars climbing. For 12 seconds, perfection. Then an interruption. A line of text appeared, sharp as a blade across the glowing display. System architect verification required. The engineer froze. His fingers rattled across the keys, trying credentials again. Access denied. Another attempt. Authentication failure. It's just a minor hiccup, he stammered. A small protocol issue. Then fix it, Lucas snapped, still smiling, his jaw taut beneath the veneer. The room shifted almost imperceptibly. The investors didn't speak, but the silence grew heavier, charged with the kind of attention that comes when billions are at stake. A new message appeared, larger now, in bold. Licensing verification required. Time remaining, 12:47. Contact system architect for resolution. The countdown had begun. Madison, oblivious, kept her stream going. So, sometimes tech has glitches, but that's why we have the best team in the world. Turn that off, Lucas hissed, eyes flashing. She blinked, confused, but kept recording. The comments scrolled on her feed. LOL. Tech fail. Is this supposed to happen? Maybe let the niece fix it. The Durham team exchanged subtle glances. Years of experience in risk assessment spoke louder than words. A system that failed under demonstration could not be trusted with billions. Richard Durham's voice cut the tension. Mr. Varelli, is there a problem? Lucas's smile wavered. No problem at all. Routine security protocol. He turned sharply to Harrison, the freshly promoted CTO who had inherited Rachel's mantle only 30 minutes ago. Fix this, now! Harrison's fingers flew, sweat beading at his temple. Sir, I can't access the core. It's like it's locked from the outside. That's impossible. We control all access points. Not all of them, Harrison whispered. His face was pale. There's a reference here to something called Level 17. I've never seen it before. The countdown ticked mercilessly on, 11:23, 11:22. Get Rachel Morgan on the phone, Lucas barked. Sir, his assistant said, trembling, she was terminated this morning. I know she was terminated. Get her anyway. The phone rang on speaker. Rachel's recorded voice filled the room. You've reached Rachel Morgan. If this is regarding Monarch system architecture, please consult your licensing agreement. Have a great day. Lucas slammed his hand on the table. The polished oak shuddered. Across the room, Richard Durham closed his leather folio. His expression had shifted from polite interest to something colder. Mr. Varelli, your system is inaccessible during a billion-dollar demonstration. Your new director is live-streaming our confidential meeting. And apparently, the only person who can resolve this is the woman you fired this morning. He stood. We'll be in touch. Maybe. The Durham delegation filed out, their silence more cutting than any shouted words. The engineers looked stricken. Madison lowered her phone at last, confusion spreading across her face as the comments roasted Archite in real time. The screens flickered again. The countdown read 8:45. Then one final line appeared, stark and unyielding. Monarch system entering protective mode. All access revoked. For licensing inquiries, contact Morgan Technologies, LLC. Authorized representative, Margaret Morgan. It was done. In less than half an hour, Archite's crown jewel had slipped from its grasp, not in secret, but on the grandest possible stage. The Durham deal was dead. Investors would scatter. Stock prices would fall. And the story, helped by Madison's unwitting broadcast, was already racing through the veins of the Internet. History remembers many corporate collapses, but what unfolded here was not just a business failure. It was humiliation, raw and public, a lesson in arrogance. They had believed they owned everything. Now the world knew they owned nothing. The Brennan and Associates building rose like a blade of glass against the skyline, its 23rd floor reserved for clients who played the long game. Rachel had walked these halls 3 years earlier, structuring a legal shell that seemed paranoid at the time, an LLC in her mother's name, quietly holding the patents at Monarch's core. Back then, even she had hoped it would never matter. Now she knew it had saved her life's work. Thomas Brennan was waiting, a lawyer whose calm smile carried the weight of foresight. "Morgan," he said, extending his hand, "I hear you've had an employment change. Let's discuss your options." His secretary poured coffee, the kind that came in porcelain cups rather than cardboard sleeves, and for a moment Rachel let herself taste the difference between exile and autonomy. On her laptop, the attacks had already begun. Red text scrolled across the screen. Failed attempts from Romania, Russia, Malaysia, a particularly aggressive cluster from Belarus. Lucas had wasted no time throwing money at the dark web. Desperation leaves a digital trail. "They're trying brute force," Rachel murmured. Brennan peered over her shoulder, unimpressed. "And?" "They don't realize Monarch isn't a fortress to be stormed. It's a gate that won't open unless you own the key." At that moment, Harrison, Archite's panicked new CTO, was probably huddled with engineers praying for a miracle. Lucas, she imagined, was pacing, barking orders, veins pulsing at his temple. And Madison? She was likely live-streaming it all, turning Archite's implosion into entertainment for her followers. Rachel's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Then she typed a command. A false Monarch instance bloomed on her screen, indistinguishable from the real one to anyone without architect-level knowledge. A honeypot. Hackers poured in, believing they had broken through. They began downloading what they thought was Monarch's source code, eager to claim victory and cash their employer's payment. In reality, every keystroke was being logged, every location pinged, every alias tagged to a real-world identity. Got you, Rachel thought, watching the trap close. One hacker even messaged her directly. Nice try with the fake instance, but we're better than that. Rachel smiled, typing back, check your compile logs. There was a pause. Then a second message. Who is this? She answered with 2 words that felt like a verdict. The architect. Silence followed. Then connections began terminating one by one, rats fleeing a ship they didn't realize was already on fire. Too late. The phone home protocols had already dispatched their data. On her laptop, an email notification surfaced, forwarded by the honeypot, lifted straight from Lucas's account. Payment confirmed. $50K transferred to CryptoGhost for emergency system recovery. Delete this thread. Rachel screenshotted it instantly. Wire fraud, computer fraud, securities fraud. Lucas had just handed her evidence that would keep regulators busy for years. Her phone buzzed. Janet again, whispering urgently, Rachel, it's chaos here. Harrison looks like he's about to collapse. Lucas just threw a laptop. What's going on? Listen carefully, Rachel said. In about 5 minutes, they're going to think they've regained control. When that happens, stall. Ask to review every line of code. Document everything. Screenshots, emails, recordings. We'll need evidence. Janet's voice was steady now, fueled by purpose. Understood. We'll get it all. Rachel ended the call and closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost see the boardroom, Lucas grinning as the false monarch flickered back to life, engineers sighing in relief, investors being begged to return. And all the while, the poisoned patch they were celebrating would degrade the system under stress, turning their next victory demo into an even greater humiliation. Beside her, Brennan chuckled softly. Remind me never to cross you, Miss Morgan. Rachel shook her head. I'm not vindictive. I'm thorough. There's a difference. That difference mattered. Revenge burns hot and fast, leaving ashes. Thoroughness rewrites history. The law was on her side, the patents filed, the LLC airtight. The code was on her side, layered, disciplined, waiting for license verification no one else could provide. And now, even Arkite's own desperation was on her side, weaving a net of evidence from their clumsy attempts to reclaim what was never truly theirs. History often records collapses as sudden. A company loses billions overnight. An empire falls in a single battle. But those moments are rarely spontaneous. They are the culmination of years of arrogance, of blind spots ignored, of talent discarded. Lucas Varelli had dismissed her at 7:59 a.m., believing he was in control. By mid-afternoon, he had already given her everything she needed to ensure his empire's undoing. The ghosts of Arkite's arrogance were rising, and Rachel had all the traps prepared. The Fairmont Hotel's executive lounge was a world apart from the panic-consuming Arkite's offices. Here, coffee was poured into bone china, and sunlight stretched across a skyline that seemed indifferent to corporate collapses. Clara Renner sat at a corner table, silver hair catching the light, posture as immovable as the capital she controlled. Senior partner at Durham Equity, she was a woman who had overseen more acquisitions than most had hot meals. Miss Morgan, she said without rising, power rarely stands. She gestured to the chair opposite. I've had an interesting morning. Rachel took the seat. For a moment, she felt the contrast keenly. Hours earlier, she had been escorted out of Arkite, like a criminal, cardboard box in hand. Now she was sipping coffee across from one of the most influential financiers in the country. Richard called me directly, Clara continued. In 30 years of partnership, I've never heard him so animated. He used words I didn't know were in his vocabulary. Arkite disappointed him. No, she corrected herself. Lucas Varelli disappointed him. Clara slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a document Rachel knew well, the incorporation papers for Morgan Technologies, LLC, her mother listed as primary stakeholder. Durham's legal team had moved quickly. Every patent, every critical filing, every innovation that makes Monarch valuable, Clara said, all trace back here. Archite never owned Monarch. They were only renting it. Rachel nodded. As long as certain conditions were met. Conditions, Clara repeated, savoring the word, that were violated at 7:59 this morning. She set down her cup, eyes sharpening. Tell me, Miss Morgan, was this always your plan? Rachel met her gaze steadily. The plan was to build something revolutionary. The insurance was just in case. Clara leaned back, studying her. Well, your insurance has matured. The question is, what do you want? Rachel inhaled slowly. She had rehearsed this in her mind 1,000 times, though never expecting to need it. I want to build the company Archite should have been. No nepotism, no treating innovation as a commodity to be packaged and sold to the highest bidder. We build with vision, with ethics, with purpose. Clara's lips curved into a knowing smile. So, you want control. Rachel shook her head. I want direction, purpose. Monarch can be more than profitable. It can be transformative, but only if it's built right. Durham Equity had been prepared to invest $1.3 billion in Archite's version of Monarch. That deal was dead. Yet here Clara was, offering something more. A new entity, she proposed. Monarch Global Systems. Durham provides capital and infrastructure. You provide the technology and the vision. Your mother's LLC licenses the patents. And Archite, Clara gave a dismissive flick of her hand, becomes irrelevant. She slid another document across the table. Numbers stared back at Rachel, a signing bonus that would secure her mother's care for life, a budget that would allow her to reassemble her entire team. Salaries, labs, offices, resources Archite had always rationed, but Durham could provide in abundance. Rachel thought of her mother's voice on the phone that morning, fierce despite illness. She thought of her team, brilliant and exhausted, trapped under Lucas's ego. She thought of Madison, live streaming a collapse she barely understood. I have conditions, Rachel said. Clara's smile widened. I expected nothing less. First, I bring my team, the core developers who built Monarch with me. They deserve to see it succeed. Done. Second, Monarch's ethical guidelines are non-negotiable. No surveillance contracts, no weaponization except defensive, no selling user data. We build tools that empower, not exploit. Clara raised an eyebrow. That will limit revenue streams. It will open others. The world is desperate for AI they can trust. We'll be the gold standard. Clara inclined her head. Go on. Third, Rachel continued, our launch has to be visible. Madison's live stream made Monarch's failure public. Our birth must be just as public. Everyone should know who really built this technology and who squandered it. Clara laughed softly, a genuine laugh, not the polite mask of finance. Oh, I like you. Yes, I think we can arrange that. Anything else? Rachel thought for a moment. The signing ceremony, 10:47 a.m. Specific timing, Clara noted. It has significance. Rachel didn't elaborate, but the symbolism was clear. The counterpoint to 7:59. Fired in the morning, reborn before noon. They spent the next hour in negotiation, Clara's legal team joining by video conference. Details flowed, licensing structures, employment contracts, transition protocols. Every clause strengthened the foundation of what Monarch Global Systems would become. By the time Rachel stood, the shape of the future was clear. Archite would awaken tomorrow to find itself stripped of its crown jewel, its valuation gutted, its empire hollow. And in its place, something new would rise, not just a company, but a choice. History is filled with stories of institutions undone by arrogance, only to see their fragments give birth to something better. Monarch Global would be one of those stories. As Rachel left the lounge, sunlight spilled through the windows, catching the city below in gold. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. Hospital called. They said a new payment arrangement is in place. Rachel, what did you do? Rachel smiled, replying, I got fired at 7:59. By 3:47, I owned everything they needed to survive. By late afternoon, the story was everywhere. Madison's live stream had lit the fuse, and the media had done the rest. Archite systems in crisis, declared TechCrunch. Billion-dollar demo implodes in real time, wrote The Verge. On social feeds, hashtags spread like wildfire. #Monarch fail, #nepotism costs, #Rachel was right. In the span of hours, Archite's carefully built reputation had shifted from a company leading the future of AI to a cautionary tale of arrogance. Crises have a way of hardening into narrative before the facts are even fully known. Investors don't wait for explanations. They react to impressions. Employees don't wait for memos. They trade rumors in hushed voices. Journalists don't wait for press releases. They frame the story while the smoke is still rising. By the time Lucas attempted to schedule a press conference, the world had already decided what had happened. Archite had fired its architect, and in doing so, had lost its crown jewel. Rachel's phone buzzed with calls and texts, a chorus of desperation. Reporters, former colleagues, recruiters, each wanting a piece of the unfolding drama. But one call broke through. Harold Fitzgerald, Archite's chief legal counsel. His voice was strained, teetering between authority and panic. Miss Morgan, we're calling regarding the Monarch situation. What situation would that be? Rachel asked coolly. Let's not be coy. We've reviewed the patent filings. We know about Morgan Technologies, LLC. Lucas wants to meet. He's willing to discuss reinstatement, back pay, even promotion to president of technology. No, Rachel interrupted. You haven't heard the full offer. I don't need to. There was a long pause. When Harold spoke again, his voice cracked on the words. Our stock has dropped 37% in 6 hours. Without Monarch, we face potential bankruptcy. Name your price. Rachel almost pitied him. Almost. I already have what I want, she said. Monarch Global launches tomorrow. Archite is welcome to apply for a license like any other client. This is extortion, Harold spat. No, Rachel replied evenly. This is business. The same business Lucas practiced when he fired me without cause and tried to steal a decade of my work. The difference is, I did it legally. She ended the call and blocked the number. More calls would come. From board members, from desperate investors, maybe even from Lucas himself. But she had no intention of negotiating with people who treated innovation as property rather than purpose. Her screen lit up again, this time with a video call. Janet's face appeared, flushed with urgency, but bright with something else, excitement. Behind her, Rachel could see David, Sarah, and several of the core team. Rachel, is it true? Janet asked. Monarch Global, Durham backing? It's true, Rachel said, and I want all of you with me. Same positions, 50% salary increase, equity stakes, the chance to build Monarch the way we always dreamed. The room behind Janet erupted in cheers. David raised his fist. Sarah wiped her eyes. These were not just colleagues, they were co-architects of a vision Archite had never deserved. When do we start? David asked. Monday, Rachel replied. Durham's lawyers will handle your exits. Document everything, and don't sign anything without their review. As for your current projects, Archite will manage. If they can't, that's not your failure. The team nodded, each of them understanding the gravity of what was happening. They weren't simply changing jobs, they were defecting from a sinking empire to help build a new one. Later that evening, Rachel's mother called again. "I got the strangest call today," she said, voice tinged with amusement. "Someone named Lucas, very agitated, offered me $10 million for some paperwork I signed years ago." "What did you tell him?" "That I don't negotiate with men who fire my daughter," her mother said proudly. "Also that his hair gel made him look unprofessional, even over video." Rachel laughed, tension breaking. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart. Now tell me everything about this new company. Don't leave out a single detail." As Rachel spoke, filling her mother in on Monarch Global, Durham's backing, and the team who would follow her, she felt the last weight of the day lift. What had begun as termination was already transforming into liberation. History remembers moments not only for collapse, but for what rises in their place. Arkite's empire was crumbling. Monarch Global was taking shape. And phones that had once carried orders from above were now carrying desperate pleas. Stories were hardening, sides were forming, and Rachel knew which side of history she was on. The following morning, the 42nd floor of the Durham building no longer looked like vacant office space. Overnight, it had been transformed into the seed of something new. Monarch Global Systems. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled daylight across open workstations where Rachel's team was already setting up, their excitement palpable. No corner offices, no segregated executive floor. It was a space built to breathe, to collaborate. At the center of the floor stood a countdown clock, numbers glowing in quiet rhythm as they approached 10:47 a.m. The chosen moment was not arbitrary. It was a counterpoint to the hour of her exile, 7:59 a.m., a reminder that the same clock that takes can also give. Fired in the morning, reborn before noon. Janet had brought champagne, her laugh cutting through the nervous anticipation. David was already configuring servers, muttering happily about performance benchmarks. Sarah had set up a monitor to stream live coverage of Arkite's collapsing stock price, the red numbers falling like a thermometer plunged into ice water. "Ready?" Clara Renner asked, appearing at Rachel's side in a tailored charcoal suit, her calm presence radiating authority. Rachel looked around at her team, the people who had debugged code at 3 a.m., who had shared takeout on launch nights, who had kept faith when management had lost vision. Their faces told her everything she needed to know. "Yes," she said simply. "This feels right." Visitors had begun to arrive, journalists, industry bloggers, a camera crew from CNN. Clara leaned close. "We planned for a quiet press release. But Lucas held a press conference this morning, accusing you of sabotage. I thought you might like to respond. Publicly." Rachel's phone buzzed at that moment, a message from her mother. "Watching the news. Lucas looks terrible. His hair gel can't hide the panic. Give them hell, sweetheart." Rachel smiled. Timing had a way of aligning. At precisely 10:47, Rachel stood at a long table set with contracts, incorporation documents, patent transfers, employment agreements. Reporters crowded close, cameras flashing. The countdown clock struck 0. "Miss Morgan," one journalist called out, "how do you respond to accusations that you sabotaged Arkite?" Rachel uncapped her pen, signed the first document, and then answered. "I spent 10 years building Monarch. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every line of code came from my team's dedication. The only sabotage was Lucas Varelli's decision to prioritize nepotism over competence." Another reporter pressed forward. "But weren't you an Arkite employee when you filed these patents?" "I was an employee protecting my intellectual property through legal means," Rachel said, signing the second contract. "Arkite had full usage rights so long as our employment agreement was honored. They chose to violate that agreement." The final page waited. Rachel signed it slowly, deliberately, as the cameras clicked. When her pen left the paper, cheers erupted. Champagne corks popped. Across town, Arkite's stock dropped another 12% in real time. Clara stepped forward to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Durham Equity Partners is proud to announce full funding for Monarch Global Systems. We are not just launching a company, we are launching a new standard for ethical AI development. The press shouted questions, but Rachel let Clara take them. Instead, she walked toward her new workspace. No private office, just a desk among her team. On it sat a simple placard, Rachel Morgan, Chief Architect. She placed her hand on it, the gesture small, but weighted with meaning. Yesterday, she had walked into Archite as an executive who thought she was secure. Yesterday, she had walked out as an exile with nothing but a box of personal items and a hidden USB. Today, she was at the helm of something larger, freer, and more enduring. History is not only written in collapses. It is written in signatures, in rituals, in public declarations that say, "This exists, and it will not be erased." At 7:59 a.m., Rachel Morgan had been erased from Archite. At 10:47 a.m., she wrote herself back into history. By afternoon, Monarch Global was no longer an idea, but an institution. The signing had been broadcast across financial networks. Journalists were filing breathless stories, and Archite stock had tumbled further into freefall. The air in the new office buzzed with energy, a heady mixture of relief, triumph, and anticipation. Rachel sat at her desk, the same as everyone else's. No corner office, no frosted glass partitions. She had barely touched the placard that read, Chief Architect, when a notification pinged on her screen. The sender made her pause. Madison Varelli. The message was short, but not shallow. Miss Morgan, I want to apologize for my behavior yesterday. I was set up to fail by my uncle, who used me to justify his decisions. I'm leaving Archite and going back to school for a real computer science degree. Maybe one day I'll have the chance to learn from someone who actually built something. Rachel read it twice. Madison had been the spark for her downfall, but also the accidental witness to Archite's implosion. It was tempting to dismiss her entirely. Yet history often judges people not by their failures, but by how they respond to them. Rachel typed a reply. Monarch Global has an excellent internship program. Apply when you're ready to work for it. She hit send. A small gesture, but one that carried the quiet dignity of offering a second chance without ever promising a third. Behind her, Janet called out, "Drinks are ready!" The team gathered around, champagne glasses in hand, their laughter rising above the hum of new servers. David raised his glass. "To Monarch Global." Sarah added, "To doing it right this time." Janet grinned. "To showing them what we're really capable of." Rachel lifted her own glass. She thought of her mother, starting her new treatment protocol with full coverage secured. She thought of her team, who had crossed the bridge from one empire to another. She thought of Archite's board, still trapped in emergency meetings, trying to salvage a ship whose hull was already gone. "To second chances," she said softly, "and to making sure we never need a third." The glasses clinked. Laughter filled the space. Then, as naturally as breathing, the team went back to work. Because while Lucas was still raging at lawyers and investors, Rachel and her people were already building what came next. Outside the window, the Archite Tower stood visible in the distance, a monument to what arrogance had built and what arrogance had lost. Rachel didn't look at it for long. The future was here. In this room, in the hum of machines and the sparkle of code taking form again under the right hands. History will remember that they fired her at 7:59. By 10:47, she had signed Monarch Global into existence. But the real story was not the revenge, nor even the collapse of Archite. The real story was that a group of builders, given a second chance, had chosen to make something better. And that, Rachel knew, was just the beginning.